All right. It is just after the trade deadline here in 2026. And so I wanted to go over the trades that I made since my last post was kind of showing the trades I was looking at. I did kind of load up here for the stretch run. Um, and just a quick little note about that. When I play this game, I try to not make tons of big trades in a way because I think over time, as you learn the game, the trade engine, you can exploit some things in it. So I try to limit like the number of trades I make in some ways, not like a hard cap, but I just try not to make tons of blockbuster trades. Like I'm not going to go out and make trades for 4 or 5 all-stars in one year. And I also have more fun playing this game when I kind of do it with a core group of players and try to build around a core and hold on to them for a long time and have some continuity. And especially like with the Orioles, I kind of like keeping like Mountcastle and Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman and some of these other guys that are actual Orioles. So those are kind of some things that I do as I play and how I like to play the game and how I find it most fun. But I did make more trades at this trade deadline than I generally make because I just want to win it this year, man. I haven't won it yet. It's 2026. Last year's out of the park. I'd won 2 World Series by this time with the Orioles. So anyways, no real team update, but I'll let you know. So it's August 1st, and I'm 63 and 47, 7.5 behind the Yankees. I've lost 3 in a row. They've won 3 in a row, so that lead was just 4.5 a few days ago. But 3 up on the Astros for the first wild card spot, and securely 5.5 games ahead of the Red Sox, who also just closed that gap there by 3 games. So what trades did I make? That's a good question. Thanks for asking. Here are the trades. So on July 6th, I don't believe I'd made this trade last time. If I'm repeating myself, oh well. I know I was thinking about it, but I brought in Blake Cederland, who is basically a number 2 or 3 starter when he's healthy, and he's been hurt this whole year, and he only pitched a third of an inning for the Pirates as went on a rehab assignment when I acquired him. And he's pitched 3 games for me, but basically a 2.7, 4.3, 3.2 WAR guy. He's had a 3.62 ERA each of the last 2 seasons. He's a solid 2 starter, maybe 3 when he's healthy. We'll see what we get. I really needed a 5th starter. My 5th starter spot was a disaster, so I brought him in to hopefully be that as a free agent after the year. And also brought in a really good reliever, Taylor Rogers, who's with the Twins in real life, but he put up 1.7 WAR and a 3.18 ERA in just 34 innings for the Pirates. He had a rough outing for me. But so he's going to pitch out of the back end of the bullpen, which my bullpen has been terrible. I think I'm second to last in the AL in ERA. And for bullpen ERA and only like 10th in the AL in starters ERA. So the hope there is to solidify the pitching staff. I gave up Estevez, who's a nothing prospect. Polite is a decent pitching prospect who I signed out of independent ball a couple of years ago. I think his ceiling is probably like a 4 or 5 starter in the majors, maybe. Now he's listed as a reliever here, so like some of his stuff is bumped up, and so is his control above what his potential would be as a starter. And Sincere Smith, no big deal. He's just a minor league kind of infielder. Diego Castillo is a reliever I'd acquired earlier in the year, but the Pirates really wanted him. I was willing to give him up. And then Marmelo is an interesting prospect who have been having a really good year in A-ball. It had a 116 runs created plus at just 22 years old, but my scout still doesn't think that much of him. A lot of teams really liked him, so maybe my scout's just lower on him than some teams. So anyway, so that solidifies the pitching staff some with the starter and the reliever. And then, here, Willie Castro was brought in to be the starting second baseman to replace Drew Bowser. Castro has put up 2 5-WAR seasons in 2023 and 24. Then the last 2 years has had a runs created plus down around 100 or so and been like a 2.5 3-WAR player. But Bowser was really struggling at the plate. Bowser will now be my utility guy because he can play all 3 infield positions really well. And I actually DFA'd Rylan Bannon to make room for Castro. Bannon, he was doing fine, but he, as a backup infielder, Bowser fits the bill a lot more with being able to play all 3 positions really well, and Castro is an upgrade over Bowser as the starting second baseman. I gave up Adam Hackenberg, who's a 26-year-old minor league catcher. He's in Double-A. He's actually can probably be a decent major league backup catcher, but that's probably his ceiling. And then I made another trade with the Pirates here. I traded Persecki, who's not a legit pitching prospect. He's I don't think much of him. I don't think he's going to make the majors. But I got Tom Hackemer, who put up 1.1 WAR and a 1.91 ERA in 28 innings for the Pirates this year. No home runs, great movement. So I love that. He's a leader, got good work ethic, but really trying to bring in these ground ball pitchers with good movement to keep the ball in the yard at Camden Yards. So another bullpen arm. And then here's the big one. I traded for Luis Campusano, who has been the best catcher in the majors so far this year. And Adley Rutschman has been probably the worst catcher in the majors this year. And so let's go ahead. So he's 27 years old. As you can see, they had, I cannot remember who their starting catcher was, but he just got this job full-time kind of the last year or two. Maybe it was Mejia was their catcher, but who left for free agency. So anyways, this year so far he's put up 3.8 WAR and a 153 runs created plus. As you can see, the 2 years before that kind of part-time work, but a very good defensive catcher who has a OPS plus of 108 in 1,500 Major League plate appearances. And the last few years has been, 125, 101, and then 154. He has played one game for me. He tied the game in the top of the ninth with a solo home run. Lost the game, but he made some noise. So anyways, and his contract is pretty friendly too. This year he's making 6.1, and then he's going 9-4, 12-7, 12-7. Padres agreed to take on a whole 5% of it. But so he's under team control for 3 more years, and he's the best catcher in baseball this year. So that's obviously going to cost you a lot. But the Padres had some catching depth, and even though they're in the race, we're willing to give him up because they got back a whole lot in return. Daniel Cabrera will be a major league outfielder for them. I just didn't have room for him. He's 27. And I mean, just look at these runs created plus he's put up in Norfolk the last few years. 126, 141, 119, 155. Now for me, he's had 129 plate appearances in the majors and put up a 98 runs created plus. So he's been about league average in limited time. I think he's probably going to be a pretty good bat for them. I tried to make room for him, but just didn't have it. So he had a lot of trade value, so I was willing to give him up. Moises Chase is a minor league pitcher who I think this guy could be a back end of the rotation piece if he develops. He's 23. A lot of teams have wanted him for a couple of years. They've asked about him in trades a lot. And he's had some decent years for me. I mean, he put up 3.5 WAR in 122 innings, a 2.29 ERA in Frederick for me in high A. So, and I mean, he's got some really good pitches here. Throws 98. I don't see him as anything more than like a fringe back end of the rotation arm at best. So I think he'll be a major league contributor quite possibly for the Padres, but had to give him up. This is the one that kind of hurts. Josh Milliken, who's the number 75 prospect in baseball. He kind of stalled out in low A ball for me. I mean, I probably could have had him in regular A ball this year. I just had kind of a glut of infielders there, and Milliken really hadn't torn it up at low A, so I left him there for an extra year. My scout thinks his 60 future value, which is kind of like an all-star level player if he reaches his ceiling, which you can see why. He's got a bunch of above average to great tools, no tools that are too bad. His contact's only a 45 if he reaches it, but with this arm of only a 45 and the range of only 50, I think he's limited to second base and, in first base. That was one of the reasons I was willing to give him up over the other prospects that they were wanting. There was really no prospect. There were ones that weren't in the top 100. There were prospects that were not rated nearly as high, but that had a better track record in the minor leagues, better stats for me, and also were better fielders. So this guy's going to be a second baseman, I think. So I think that just kind of limits him. If he could play like an awesome shortstop, I would have been more hesitant to give him up. So, and I also gave up DL Hall. DL Hall, of course, had been my number 4 or 5 starter for the last couple of years, but then transitioned to the bullpen last year when he struggled and was great out of the bullpen. Like his stuff plays up all the way to a 75, and he's got these 3 pitches. He'd been on a minor league rehab assignment for me, and he'd been hurt. He'd only thrown 21 innings for me this year. He'd been really good in those innings, 2.95 ERA, was very good as a reliever for me last year. But because I had made those other trades to stock up in the bullpen, I felt okay giving him up. He's under team control for another year after this year. I'd already signed him to an extension to avoid arbitration at $1.55 million. He was a guy who, he might have competed for a rotation spot again for me next year as some guys move on, and he was definitely a really good bullpen arm, but I feel all right with where my bullpen's at. So that was a lot to give up, a a really good bullpen arm, a top 100 prospect, a pitching prospect having a good last couple of years, and then a left fielder who is really a major league player. And I did DFA Barlow also, who's a free agent signing of mine in the offseason. He just had been, I think he had 0.0 WAR, right? In like 30 or 40 innings, just completely mediocre. And the Mets claimed him. So those are the moves. So brought in the catcher, Campusano, and then a bunch of pitching. Cedarland, we'll see what he can do to shore up the rotation. And then Austin Adams, I'd already brought in earlier in the month. Taylor Rogers, brought him in. Vasquez, I traded for earlier in the year, and then Hackemer. We'll see what happens, though. I really like this team. I think this team's super good. And we're 63-47, which is 7.5 games behind the Yankees. A .573 winning percentage, which is what? There's one team, 2, 3, 4. So we're like the fifth. I'm like the fifth or sixth best team in the majors. The Yankees are just a +7 in their Pythagorean win expectancy. Their run differential is +82. Mine is a nice +69, but they're 7.5 games ahead of me. So they're overachieving a bit. It has to do with the fact that they're 10-3 in extra inning games, 20-13 in one-run games. But hopefully we can catch them. I think I have 6 head-to-head games with them, and now I'm loaded up with a really good roster and going to try to make a run at them.